Game of the Year episodes, I'd like to take back what I said about Beat Saber being kind of cool, because I later found out why Green Day was playing.
Is it because they have a Beat Saber song?
It's because they got a Beat Saber pack. That's why they were there, including that Father of All Motherfuckers track.
I said that.
Did you say it was a Beat Saber pack?
Yeah.
Okay, because we didn't go over that on the episode.
Foam?
Oh, is that the...
That's all right. We have the audio isolated. You can't take it back.
Sidebar, though, I absolutely would have gone much deeper on Sayonara Wild Hearts if I played that before we did those recordings, because I finally played that game afterwards, thanks to you, Austin, and it is pure and beautiful and amazing. And was that the clip of it? No. Beat Saber's still fun. No!
Wait,
Shit.
I can't believe you said that after that whole bit you just did.
I said that after we talked about Green Day, right? Though you also played Disco Elysium a bit after, since recording that.
Retraction, there is voice acting in that game.
Oh, nice.
And I actually kind of dig it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It sounded pretty cool from what you were saying.
Yeah.
I'm way more ambitious
I'm a
than...
narco-communist now.
Yeah.
In that game.
It looks really cool. Like,
Yeah.
I really do want to play it. But unfortunately,
I like the
Epic
idea
Games
that
is
whole...
giving away too much shit for free for me to buy anything right now.
Yeah, they are. It's kind of wild. I didn't realize that whole game more or less takes place on like one city block, and that's how they can get so in depth with the choices. That's clever.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah, it's like a really small area.
Yeah, it's about like a city where you're a cop, and the cops have like no authority because there's a dock workers union.
Yeah.
Because it's on a dock. And they used to be like, all cool. They were just a union to support workers' rights. And then some dude came and won an election in a very seedy way to be the head of the dock workers union, and then turned it into a criminal organization.
Cool.
And because that happened a couple times, it's no longer a viable political system. So let's just keep with what we have now.
Good thing that
because
game's
that's
fantasy,
never hurt
right?
anybody.
Yeah. And then they murdered a guy and hung him up by his guts.
God.
Off of a tree.
I didn't know the game got that visceral.
You're an alcoholic, but you don't you have amnesia. You don't remember what
I think
happened.
in the game?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're an alcoholic.
Now's not the time.
And you have to get the body off of the tree to perform an autopsy, but you can't do it because you're A, hungover, and B, grossed out because he's hanging up by his guts. So every time you go to try to do it, you just throw up. And I have to find a way to sober up before I can get him off the tree.
I did read that game is apparently coming to console, so I assume there will be controller support and stuff like that, which is neat.
That's cool.
Yeah. But today we're going to talk about what is likely the most played video game of all time. And honestly,
Minecraft. We did that last week.
Yeah.
Well, no, this is probably more so technically. And honestly, why wouldn't it be? I said video game.
Video chess.
But it's been released for nearly every possible platform. It pretty much has universal accessibility, welcoming a player from almost any age group or background to approach it, regardless of skill level or native language. It can be enjoyed as a relaxing form of meditation and yet still appeal to those seeking fierce competition, by yourself or with others. It doesn't matter. There are even those who have taken to the next level with writing theses and studying the stimulating effects it can give your brain, including its connection to hallucinatory imagery, as well as its experience crossing over with music and feelings of synesthesia, while some of the other side still argue it's nefarious addiction. It's simple, it's fun, it's Tetris.
Woo!
I never heard of it. Could you explain how it works?
But its popularity...
Yes, this is the game where you like swap different color bubbles and then they disappear as they match, right?
Is that a bubble bobble? Or no, or
it could be
Puyo Pop Fever?
It could be any number of 10,000 games.
This is the one where you match three, right?
This is the one with Ken and Ryu, where you touch the diamonds to the colors.
You idiot, that's Halo.
Oh, sorry.
But its popularity and success sure doesn't make the title any less personal to me. As similarly as to how Austin spoke of the original Halo and Chris with Destiny, Tetris will always have a place in my blocky heart.
You missed the rule where you're only allowed to do Bungie games. Did Bungie make Tetris?
Yes, you were supposed to do Oni.
It was perhaps one of the first two games that I've ever played. It continues to this day to be an important part of my weekly schedule and brings back fond memories of my childhood and mom like rushing into my head. It's even grown to become a vital version of therapy to me, rewarding my anxieties of obsessive compulsion rather than simply shaming it. And I'd like to think that I'm far from the only one who has ever felt this way.
And by far the best battle royale game ever made.
That's true.
Yes.
I have a bone to pick with Tetris because my mom stole my Game Boy because it came with Tetris. And I couldn't play Pokemon, so then I got a Game Boy DX or Game Boy Color, and it came with Tetris DX, and then she stole that. So...
Can't say I blame her. I think my mom might have done the same thing with me as a kid. So where did it come from? Well, it's fairly common knowledge, perhaps due to its "From Russia with Fun" NES tagline.
It came from above our vision slowly.
That it was born out of the Soviet Union in the 80s. However, there are probably still many fans and enthusiasts out there that likely have no idea just how crazy the history of this little puzzle game actually was. A tangled web of politics, licensing, and of course crimes are just as much as a part of Tetris's history as the pieces themselves. This is Hot Button. I'm your Tetris-loving host, Randall Beatrice, here as always with Austin Blakesley and Chris Anantuano. So who's ready for a tale of communism, capitalism, and murder?
All I know about Russia is based on three things.
Okay.
James Bond's shit.
Vodka.
Call of Duty, where they were the bad guys a couple times.
Yeah. They're still the bad guys in the new one.
Chernobyl, where they all speak British. So it should be an interesting episode.
Chernobyl is going to come into play on this series, interestingly enough.
The TV show or the nuclear reactor blowing?
The actual...
Oh, okay.
Russia is an insanely fascinating place.
Yeah.
Oh, no, wait. There's a fourth one, Russian dash cams.
Yes.
Dash cam compilation
Wait, no,
videos.
fifth one, John Wick. There you go. There's my top 5 references for how Russia works.
It is insane. My favorite, most fascinating part about Russia that I think is it is so extremely large. I don't think anybody can quite get how large it is unless you look at a map.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
There are parts of Russia that are like 10 feet away from Japan.
Yeah.
Okay? And like people that live on these little islands that are coastal, touching like China and area, who have like ethically and culturally basically Chinese people, but they're technically Russians.
Weird,
And they
I never
live
thought about that.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles away from like white people Russia, which is all like right next to Europe.
Yeah, when you think of like Western, like...
Me and Randy and a couple of our friends played a game, which I highly recommend to everybody out there, called GeoGuessr. It is the words GeoGuessr, but the last E is taken out.
Oh my God, this was great.
And all it does is it drops you in a random part of the world using Google Street View.
Yeah.
And then it brings up Google Maps, and you have to drop a pin where you think you are.
Based on like what you see.
Based
That's
on what
pretty
you
cool.
see. And the Russia part, because even if you get like a sign that clearly has Russian writing on it, you're like, okay, we're in Russia.
It could be
And
it could be
gives-
Kazakhstan or
It
fucking
gives you
Ukraine.
points. It gives you points based on if you're close, you get a lot of points. If you're far away, you get less points. Russia might as well be hard mode because it's just all snow and trees.
Yeah, and you could be like, well, maybe that's here in Russia, and you're like on the other side of the globe, but it's the same.
Moscow and like St. Petersburg is actually, I think, still pretty far east.
Yes.
But still barely even touches as far when you get east into this massive, just nothing land.
Moscow is also going to come into play quite a bit in the story, which I guess is evident by the Kremlin being
like
on
a
the...
European city too. But I just think it's fascinating how big that fucking
No, totally
place
it is.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's kind of nuts. And I do apologize that there is a bit of heavy emotions in here.
How are you gonna have trouble
frequently
pronouncing stuff?
I actually find the Russian names much easier than the
like
Polish
names?
ones.
Okay.
Yeah,
There's more harder sounds and less
their alphabet looks dope.
ups and
though.
downs. Yeah.
It's just cool looking.
Polish names look like Mordor.
Too many
Look
fucking
like it's a
consonants.
Mordor. Just up and down lines.
And before we begin, I know we usually do these at the end, but I would like to thank the gaming historian for finding a lot of this information that I'm about to read. His research was by far the most thorough that I've seen on the subject, even more than the official wiki pages. I would be remiss if I forgot to bring that up. I actually, recently I did reach out and email him for some source links that we can post later in our stuff.
Cool.
I will have all of those along with a bunch of other sites that I use to verify and deeper elaborate on these things. So what do you guys say?
I say,
Let's go.
welcome to the new year.
Yeah. Oh my God. I totally forgot. It is now 2020.
Yeah.
Not
right.
when you're listening to this, it will be 2020.
Some movie magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, behind the scenes magic. We are a couple days away from 2020 as we record this.
So, yeah, this is a new year of Hot Button. We got a lot of shit
Yeah.
I'm excited about. I'm really excited about this episode.
Yeah, it's
I've been
cool.
waiting for it for a long time.
I did have
Randy's been working on it since Another
It's been
behind
a
the
long
scenes.
time.
He's been working on this since before he started doing the work on our Halloween block of episodes, which was in October. So.
Here's the crazy thing. It's like translating a lot of the stuff was one thing. Verifying it was hard because there's a lot of the story is going to have a cast of characters to keep track of. And it's like, I found it very surprising how little of this information is like really available easily. Like
you watched Chernobyl, right?
I did. That's a good point.
Imagine how much of that information is
It's
readily
been like
available.
redacted. Yeah. So a lot of this are going to come from firsthand accounts of people who were later interviewed, because it's like this timeline has not been like archived in the same way like modern game development
There
can
are no
be.
books about how Tetris was made.
No, not exactly.
All right, so we have murder.
Not that I know of. There
we have
probably is.
murder.
Murder is involved.
And we have political drama.
A mysterious
and
suicide
first-hand accounts
is also involved.
and a cast of characters' names we'll remember. Welcome to Game of Block Thrones.
This will be more coherent than Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
So our setting is 1984 during the Cold War, with the most attention obviously being focused on the animosity between former allies, the United States and the Soviet Union.
They call it the Cold War because Russia's cold. I just realized that. Okay, continue. All right.
Both were similar in terms of fearing nuclear attack from the other, although the two nations were vastly different in terms of their living state. The U.S. at the time was experiencing major economic growth. There were tech breakthroughs and product launches like the Apple II computer. We hosted the Summer Olympics that year in L.A., which Russia famously boycotted. Even our culture was beginning to spread more around the globe as well, with hit movies like Ghostbusters and Indiana Jones, while music from American artists were selling better than ever. Malls were opening, toy crazes were booming, everyone was on cocaine.
I've been Sour Patch. No.
Some would say all this success comes from the money from the military-industrial complex because we were in the middle of an arms race with sorry.
The Soviet Union, however, things were not looking nearly as bright.
Is it because they were communists and
Flyers.
Americans were forcing them to become a collapsed economy so they could turn them into a capitalist nation years
This was
later?
also right around the time that we beat Russia.
Yeah,
in
which
the
came up
Winter
on a
Olympics.
previous episode.
It came up in one of the microtransactions.
Yes, that was our
episodes.
first one.
Yes.
And the Philadelphia Flyers had recently beaten the Russians so bad that they went home crying. That's my little bit of Philly citizen coming out.
So at this point, their economy was almost completely stagnated. Much of this was due to the cost of oil vastly declining, the country's largest export. This combined with their 5-year-long conflict with Afghanistan at the time in those days led to
and then we beat them at that, right? Well, 5 years, come on, man. Can't do at least 20.
God. But this led to a pretty dark period for the nation's poor and starved citizens. The government attempted to restore order, but an ill leader and lack of worldwide support made this extremely difficult. The tensions were high, and both nations were fully divided. But then, that summer, something truly special in the form of a video game was invented, helping to break down a bit of the social and cultural boundaries between the two superpowers. Sorry for a little bit of that history lesson there. I'm sure you guys all know your shit.
Turned Russia into a capitalist oligarchy or a dictatorship? Sorry.
This will all come into play later, trust me. So with the stage all set, let's get a little bit into the background of the main man most credited to bring the wonder of Tetris into our lives, Mr. Alexey Leonovich Pajitnov. Way easier than those Polish names before, but
Yeah, you got it right first try.
First try. Now, there will still be some other influential figures in our story later as well.
Now, how soon does he die, or does he get his head cut off? Is he more of like a Stark kind of character? Or
No, he's still going strong.
Okay.
But Pajitnov will essentially always be known as the forefather here. And rightfully so when we get into his development of the title's original build. But before we get there, just where did this legendary designer come from? He was born in 1956 in Moscow. His mom was a journalist who specialized in reporting on all things cinema, a fairly controversial art form at the time there, while his father was a philosopher and writer, as well as a dedicated member of the communist regime.
You remember when philosopher was like a job?
It was a
that
job,
you could have?
yeah.
Yeah, right?
And now there's
crazy,
like 2 or 3 of them, right?
Yeah.
Engineer, business. That's
Wait,
it.
what? Oh, no, I'm saying there's like only a couple of philosophers left.
Oh, I think you're saying there's a couple of jobs left.
No.
When I read that, though, that was the most, like, no shit moment where I was like, wow, he came from parents of a philosopher. Like, it just seems...
But why did the blocks drop?
When his parents divorced at age 11, he moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment with his mom, but the two would later grow closer as she began to introduce young Alexey to the world of film and other foreign culture, even bringing him along with her to Moscow's International Film Festival. One of his first major interests was the English's James Bond, which I can relate to.
Wait, so we're the bad guys?
I suppose this also explains the reference earlier, I guess, which is kind of funny. From Russia with Fun.
Oh, that's a James Bond thing.
Yeah, From Russia with Love. Something else, though, that also fascinated him were puzzles and board games. Quote, one of the few forms of entertainment available to children of the Soviet Union. His favorite
fucking nerd
was one called Pentominoes, wherein the purpose was to properly arrange 12 unique puzzle pieces made up of 5 blocks each into a small rectangle. It's kind of hard to describe without any visual, but I think you'd recognize it if you were to Google it. Yeah,
very similar.
You have a shape to make, and you have a set of blocks, and it has to go in a specific way.
Yeah.
It's very similar to a board game that exists now called Blockus, if anybody listening has played that.
I know Blockus. Yeah.
Yes.
Or any sort of like weird puzzle you could buy at like a fucking Barnes & Noble or something like that.
Yeah, or Sharper Image.
Yeah.
I don't know. Skip ahead a couple years during the great space race of the 60s that he was growing up alongside. It was not uncommon for the USSR to recruit young scientists and engineers to help give advantage over the American competition. In order to keep interest in kids wanting to go into the field as well, they would also frequently hold events to expose them to new technology. This included a 17-year-old Pajitnov, who soon saw his first computer. It inspired him so much that he enrolled in the Moscow Institute of Aviation, where he earned his master's degree in applied mathematics. And after graduation, he joined the Russian Academy of Sciences, a very well-known and prestigious school, which this all led to his job at the still-functioning Dorozhny Computing Center. Maybe I should have...
What was that about, getting all these names right?
I know. It doesn't look that bad typed out. But this was a lab created with research in physics, programming and mechanics, artificial intelligence, you name it. Many famous scientists came out of here, including the discoverer of nuclear winter theory. Less important than Tetris, but, we all got to start somewhere.
That's a hell of a word there. I just looked at Randy's computer.
Anyway, one major problem when Alexey was brought on board was that their available equipment and computers there at the time were not exactly cutting edge. Pretty much all the employees had no choice but to use the same giant slow mainframes with little promise of any gear being updated.
Makes sense. All the best shit was all of the space centers where they were like, communism could do something better than you, capitalism.
Another issue for our poor protagonist were the unfortunate working conditions. Pajitnov didn't have his own office or even desk, as it was shared by 3 other people. But eventually, something broke his 14-hour work routine when him and his coworkers were shocked to find that they got an upgrade at the office. An Electronica 60, with a K, computer workstation.
That's so cool.
That is fucking cool.
All right, get this.
I love 80s, like, Japanese tech. I would love to see 80s, like, Russian technology.
It's just 70s Japanese tech.
Oh, yeah.
But it had 64 kilobytes worth of space, 8 kilobytes of RAM.
I think that fucking audio clip I played of you saying Beat Saber was good is fucking more than that.
And could perform 250,000 operations per second. How is that, Austin? Is that still good? Sounds like a big number.
250,000?
Yeah.
So that would be 250 kiloflops.
What, a second?
Which the
Where
Xbox,
are we at now? Because I see
the
teraflops.
Xbox One's, the Xbox Series X is supposed to be 12 teraflops, so that should put that in perspective.
I bet Tetris will be on that thing.
Yeah, probably.
That's one of my. If I had a time machine, that would be my most favorite thing. I was thinking about this the other day. It's just showing technology to people of the past. Oh, your entire career was based off of 4 kilobytes. This image the corner of this image is more than that.
It's like the Patton Oswalt bit where he was saying when the iPod was invented, all he would have to do is go back 10 years to blow everyone's mind because like they'd just be like, so how much music is on that thing? And they're like, every song that's ever been written and ever will be written. And they're like, these must cost $1 million. And he's like, no, they're worthless. You're like, this piece of shit. And you throw it. Like, they make way too many of them.
There's a future. I think that's a Futurama bit when they're getting the iPhone. He's like, "Are there any left?" "Yeah, let me see. I hope there's some in stock." And he reaches his hand behind him, and there's like a factory with millions and millions of them.
Oh, I love that people still pre-order things. It makes no sense. But yeah,
just a little tip to put more proverbial nails in GameStop's coffin. We were literally told sometimes to be like, pretend like you don't have a lot of copies of this game.
Oh, I have no
push
doubt.
Pre-order.
Yeah. So you were that guy leaning behind.
Fucking A. No, I wasn't. I would always be like, there's tons of them, dude. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I remember some GameStop employee tried to pull that shit on me. Do you remember
Oh my
that?
God.
I walked in and I was like, can I buy this game?
You know GTA 5 is not going to be available
and
anywhere.
He was like, do you have it pre-ordered? Because we only got them in for pre-orders. And I was like, oh, you did? No, I didn't have it pre-ordered. And I was just like, I guess I'll just go to Target. And I started walking up the door and he's like, no, dude, wait.
That's funny. But yeah, the mainframes were out and the Electronica 60 was in. Except here's the thing, though. Apparently, to the rest of the tech industry, it was already long out of date.
Yeah.
That computer was cloned from the LSI 11, launched with the same internals 9 years prior, with neither system being capable of displaying graphics outside of text. Nonetheless, he used what he had and began development on AI programs and speech recognition software. The latter quickly caught the attention of the KGB in hopes that they could use it to record phone conversations. Of course, they wouldn't say whose, but I digress.
What an evil regime, right? Those communists recording phone conversations.
Yeah,
imagine if they did that in the freedom center that we live in.
Didn't we just re-up on the Patriot Act?
Very quietly just renew the Patriot Act.
Yep.
Cool.
Also, I'm not entirely sure that this was even like what he was personally looking to do with that tech, so it's hard to know how he felt about it at the time, although I'm sure his opinions of their government would later probably change anyway, considering where the story goes.
Yeah.
So let's get into Tetris then. After hours, Pajitnov and the other researchers at the DCC would finally have the computers all to themselves to work on their own personal side projects.
After they did all their work, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One programmer there was super passionate about Namco's Pac-Man, a title that somehow passed through the country's infamous barriers. Alexey recounted that he would play around with it for hours attempting to reverse engineer it. Other friends of his in the department...
Wait, Pac-Man made it to Russia?
Yeah.
He just had to go from... He came from the other end. He just went this way. And then he came up from the other side, and that's how he made it past the barrier.
Other friends of his in the department included fellow researcher Dmitry Pavlovsky, saying it better that time, who would often create...
Second most Russian name I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, Pavlov.
Dmitry Rushanovich.
Would often create and port other games on their now stored away giant mainframe. And at the time, 16-year-old Vadim Gerasimov, who was said to be a true programming prodigy, earning his spot in the lab as an assistant after impressing a computer science teacher at his high school who thought he should be introduced to the crew there to learn more about the industry and have access to better tools.
Nice.
This all sounds kind of so wholesome so far, doesn't it?
Yep.
The dark shit will come later.
Just a bunch of 70s guys, or sorry, 60s guys.
80s.
This is 80s at this point?
This is early 80s. Yeah.
Okay. And this is at the Moscow school?
Institute of Tech. But yeah, it apparently didn't take long at all for the three of them to really hit it off together, much because of their shared love of games. So they formed a team and would brainstorm ideas off the clock to build a computer game successful enough that they could even package it and sell it themselves, which, quote, was an extremely difficult endeavor in the Soviet Union. Although, that wouldn't keep them down. The buddies were confident that they could find a way to make it happen. Weeks later, in the middle of the night, Pajitnov was sitting at his desk when he recalled the Pentominoes game from his childhood that I mentioned earlier, the one where you arrange the shapes into the box, and thought that he could possibly make a digital form of that. However, he soon found out that the experience of it just didn't really translate that well to the computer after some hardware limitations led to some adjustments of the pieces. Rather than the original dozen 5-block variants, he had reduced the available shapes down to 4 blocks each, thus coining the iconic 7 Tetris pieces that we all know today. The only problem with this was that the game, which he named Genetic Engineering, not quite as the same ring as Tetris, but was way too easy and boring. Once a player were to figure out the right solution, there was little reason to replay it again. Just be the same thing over and over again.
30, 40 years, you can download 18 different versions of that
same game
on your iPhone or Android device. Not only that, you get ads for them.
Yeah, right?
Constantly.
I don't think he had that in mind.
No, he was a good game designer.
Mm-hmm. This was just a first draft, though, made only in 6 days. Pajitnov was determined to turn it into something more engaging and more challenging. This is when he thought to flip the playfield from horizontal to vertical and make the pieces fall instead, thus adding a bit more chaos to the formula. Except, while it was certainly faster, now it was too hard. If the player placed a piece incorrectly and created a gap, then the row was just stuck there like that without the ability to go back and fix it. This also caused the rounds to end fairly quick. That's when he hatched the brilliant plan to make the completed rows disappear upon being filled in. The small modification would turn the project into a phenomenon. Now, mistakes in the game could be amended, and the clearing lines mechanic could make it so that one could pretty much play the game indefinitely with no end, including our creator, who is now addicted to his own creation.
I love this. Just snapping blocks together, disappear. Ooh.
There's something just satisfying, about it. Fitting the randomly given pieces together was so satisfying that it actually started to bleed into his work hours. When first asked by higher-ups what he was working on, he just claimed it was debugging software. Mm-hmm. A simple lie that would carry across generations. Have you had to use an excuse like that?
What, that I was debugging?
No, that you were playing a game and then you're like, no, it's work.
Oh, no, because I worked from home a lot.
Oh, yeah.
They couldn't see my screen.
So now the game just needed a name. Something as natural to say as its nature.
Something as natural to say as genetic engineering.
Which was good, because I don't think that was going to cut it anymore. But he quickly settled on Tetris, combining the Greek word tetra, meaning four, as per the shape redesigns, and tennis, because he liked tennis. So Tetris was born.
Are you serious?
Yeah. There was no sound. The graphics were made up of alphanumeric characters and only one stage. But he did add a scoring system, kinda, which is all you needed.
What do you mean alphanumeric? Like they were just... was it like wireframe looking?
It looked like ASCII art, kind of. I guess this was because the computers weren't capable of displaying any graphics.
Yeah, no, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I figured as much. I'm just curious, trying to get an image in my head.
I have seen footage of it, and it's the blocks are still represented by blocks, but it is kind of odd the way that the UI is completely built.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it almost looks kind of like punk rock to look at now, because it's funny that even some modern games bring back that for stylistic purposes. I kind of forgot that the entire ending sequences of Portal 1, I don't know if Portal 2 is the same, but I know Portal 1 is just all done through alphanumeric characters.
I don't think Portal 2 is. I think it's just classic credits.
I think you might be right. Great song, though.
Yeah. Jonathan Colton.
Yeah. But how exactly did the game grow beyond just his own lab? It only functioned on those outdated LSI knockoffs after all. And it was already grabbing the attention of others in the facility. In order to expand his audience even further outside the academy, though, it would need to be playable on a more common platform. This is where his previous homie comrades, Dmitry and Vadim, would come in and help port the game to the IBM PC. Of course, to get this done, Vadim practically had to rewrite the entire code.
Yeah.
And this was on a device that he wasn't exactly entirely familiar with either. Within a couple days, though, the crew got it done, and they now had a way to easier share a prototype. This one even had a title screen, along a side help menu that listed controls, and the pieces were even colored. Not what would later become the official colors, but it's a step.
Yeah.
Regardless, none of these additions proved to be more important than the inclusion of a leaderboard. That's right, you could finally save your high scores for all to see.
A-S-S-S-P-O-O. Me and Mel were playing Crash Bandicoot the other day, and I did a time trial victory, and I was just like, A-S-S. Ha ha ha. It's future.
Yeah, the future. Knowing you, I thought it would have been C-U-M.
Yeah.
Whoa. Whoa, I just got that.
At this point, though, Tetris now became a competition already, just like other arcade games out there across the world. And it finally had the same potential as them as well, except how could they sell it? The group's dream of distributing their own titles for profit seemed sort of impossible under the communist state, not to mention that it was technically all built under the roof of the Russian Academy of Sciences. This made Tetris government property, with no exception.
Right.
Not wishing to see their hard work go to waste, the trio would package the title in a collection of other game software in a bundle called Computer Funfair, and began to make copies themselves to give out to whoever they thought might enjoy it.
And this was okay. Why? Why was this okay instead of just...
Because it was free, and they were only giving it to their friends. It was just the equivalent of like a demo CD that you're just like, check it out.
So where do you know what else was in?
I tried to find some of the other games. Apparently, they were like kind of wholly impressive, pretty basic, sort of.
Yeah.
I think some of them almost read as educational, almost.
Pac-Man, but the P is backwards.
Is that a Russia joke?
Yeah.
I just got that.
One of these copies made.
Sorry, I know I don't want to mention other comedians or podcasts. One of my favorite,
I already did it earlier
one
with
of my
Pat and
favorite
Oswald.
jokes from Harmontown. She says something like, "I miss the good old days when the bad guys were just other white guys with a backwards alphabet."
Wait, you mean the Japanese are good now? That's when he's talking about the generational gap between people. But one of these made it into the hands of Vladimir Hilto, a friend of Alexey and clinical psychologist at the Moscow Medical Center. Upon firing up the games, he pretty much immediately recognized the addictiveness of Tetris, with its pacing and reward of stacking up the blocks to clear more lines as giving an almost dopamine-like high. I don't know about the other games that were on there.
I would say almost dopamine. Like
If anybody's an expert and thinks that make you miserable, it's a Russian psychologist.
So he did what any fun-loving employee would do. Make extra copies and distribute them amongst his coworkers. Except then, practically his entire fucking psychology team was hooked. One day soon after, he got so fed up with the department being glued to their monitors that he took it upon himself to kill the distraction and collected every copy throughout his work and destroyed them.
That's how you know it's good.
His efforts were fruitless, though, as it made its way back into the medical center anyway. This isn't confirmed, but people think they might have, dumpster dove for it back. Shit, I would have dumpster dove for it. No boss could stop me if they took my Tetris away. Instead of fighting it this time, though, he decided that a better alternative would be to study its addiction. They even worked on a special 2-player version there, with Pajitnov being brought in to help with development.
And even back then, he was like, maybe if 100 players.
Yes. By 1986, its popularity was really starting to spread outside Moscow into further parts of the nation. Much of this was thanks to that IGM port. Alexey was really excited to see so many people enjoying his creation, but him and his crew would still never saw a single penny from all their hard work yet. Moving even further, though, was when the game actually began to spread outside the Soviet Union. This is when everybody suddenly wanted a piece of the Tetris pie. One of those people, an avid player, was Alexey's boss, who gave out a few copies to be passed around the SCI Institute of Computer Science in Budapest, Hungary, a nation that will soon become a big part of the title's journey into the West. The folks at the school all loved it.
One could say they were hungry for Tetris.
You son of a bitch.
Sorry.
Get out!
There were even students so impassioned by it that they ported it to the Apple II and Commodore 64. These platforms, of course, being way more popular in the region.
Right.
Supposedly, Hungary, by the way, played a pretty significant role in connecting Russia to the rest of the world. Until the 1956 revolution, it was under communist rule. However, by this time, their government passed, quote, major economic reform to create a more open free market. This meant...
It means the West got to him, is what that means.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Maybe capitalist instead?
Yeah.
You said free market. I instantly looked at Chris.
Yeah. There's more money. And this meant importing and exporting, including one of their most hit products, and Chris, you'll like this, the Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
Although
that was Russian too.
Although I believe initially it was called the Magic Cube.
That's the worst name.
I think it was. It is the worst name. Well,
It's not
Rubik's is a
magic at all, it's
company.
math.
Yeah.
Rubik's is a company. So they call it's kind of like the Band-Aid situation.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean?
I guess that is true. Or Jell-O. But yeah, originally invented in 1974, its demand exploded in 1980 when it was brought in other territories. Even today, it's considered to be history's greatest selling puzzle game.
But the Rubik's Cube or Tetris?
The Rubik's Cube.
Yeah. It's not a puzzle.
It is.
It is.
It's a
How is it not a
It's a
puzzle?
lifestyle.
It's a way of life. This made Hungary a huge destination for those in business looking to license Eastern European inventions for release in Western Europe, the Americas, Japan, and Australia. You can make your Hungary joke again, I guess, there, too.
I already did it.
Oh, all right.
Move on. I'm sick of that joke.
You don't want to come back for seconds?
There you go.
So this is where we're going to introduce Richard Stein to the story. He owned Andromeda Software.
Mass Effect Andromeda?
Yeah. No relation.
No, this software company did something right.
Oh, sorry.
For now.
Oh, so just like Mass
Then they'll
Effect.
go to the way of Mass Effect Andromeda. But this was a British tech company that switched from selling hardware in 1980 to instead selling software 3 years later in 83. This being a much more profitable venture.
Because the Brits are shit at making stuff.
What about
Like my Mini.
what about empires? They were all right at that in the earlier part of the millennium.
You're going back a little bit.
Yeah,
They had that one.
yeah, that big one.
Sun never sets on my balls. Take that, British Empire.
But rather than searching around the UK for potential releases, he preferred to poke around more in Hungary as it was his native country. So he'd pretty much look for games, sell it to a Western publisher, and then once it was released, he sat back for sales to collect royalties. One such place he used to visit often on these software hunts was none other than the SCKI Institute where Pajitnov's boss distributed those Tetris copies.
Yeah, I was about to say, is any of this known to Alexey that they're selling it and making royalties and shit?
Well, no, they haven't sold it yet, technically.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
but this was this guy's job.
Yeah.
And trust me, he'll be in the dark for a little while, which is kind of, you can all probably guess what happened next, considering the trend.
Chernobyl.
Well, no, we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. Again, very limited knowledge on Russia.
Was it snow?
Was it a James Bond movie?
No, I was just
Was
talking.
it Call of Duty?
Did a European power invade and then die?
I'm not talking about
snow?
Russia.
Oh.
I'm talking about the outcome of every person that gets introduced to this game.
Oh, he got addicted to it, and then I wasn't listening. And then his psychologist destroyed all his copies, right?
Yeah.
Is that what happened?
Basically, he popped in one night, saw a guy in a dark corner blasting away at block dropping. Same thing I'm usually doing most nights. He likely
That
had a
sounded
Yeah, except he was
sexual.
probably
Just-
winning, right?
Are you kidding me? He likely had a
Just,
drink.
sitting in the dark block dropping sounds like jerking off.
I was thinking taking the shit.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
He likely had a drink next to him, also like me.
Yeah, a straight vodka bottle and a shot glass, because that's what they do. That's the other thing
They
I know
don't
about
need the
Russia.
shot, the shot
Wait,
glass.
No.
Is this a British guy or a Russian guy?
This is a Russian guy.
Okay, yeah, vodka.
They literally just pour it in a shot glass and then they take
What do
shots.
people in
That's
Hungary
what they
drink?
do.
Probably vodka.
So anyway, naturally, he walked over and said, and I quote, "What the hell is this?"
Well, cool.
The employee simply brushed him off, saying it was just a game. Richard wanted to try for himself, so he sat down and was instantly hooked, even though he didn't play many video games prior. He also saw them dollar signs, or euro signs or whatever, and went right to the director there and immediately asked about licensing. This was when he found out that the game wasn't even theirs. The director went on to say that if he truly wanted a Tetris partnership, then he'd have to take it up with the Soviet Union, which was not an easy task.
I was hoping you would say that he would have to talk to Alexey, and I was like, oh, what a good guy.
Yeah. No.
An update from earlier, Palinka is a traditional fruit brandy with origins in Hungary.
That sounds pretty
So
good.
there
That
you
sounds
go.
pretty good. I would
Yeah.
try it. So Russia was very closed off when it came to this kind of thing, obviously.
What? No.
Him simply traveling over to their capital to broker a deal for it wasn't really in the cards. Except he did have one form of communication with them already. He had the number to the Russian Academy of Sciences telex machine, a precursor to the fax machine to any of our younger listeners. Of course, that doesn't really work either, I guess.
I mean, I'm not our younger listeners, and I don't know what a telex machine is.
It's essentially like a fax machine.
Like a
So
Russian fax
what's the
machine?
point of that? Because isn't that just where he just was asking about it, right?
What's up?
That's where he just was, right? The sciences.
No,
place.
he was visiting Alexei's boss's kind of facility.
Gotcha.
But where Alexei was working separately at the Russian Academy was where the game was actually created.
Okay. And he had the fax machine number to where? What are you saying?
To there.
Oh, okay.
If he was going around licensing software, he basically had like a portfolio of
Gotcha,
kind of
gotcha,
or
gotcha, gotcha.
You can tell
maybe
us
at the
this-
time a Rolodex of numbers of like different institutes and tech facilities.
Makes sense.
Yeah, to look for
You can
things.
tell this is the 80s because if it was now, he'd be like, oh, it was made in communist Russia and the guy doesn't have a license to it? I'll just sell it. I know.
All right, so he quickly sent a message over bluntly stating that he wanted the Tetris rights. This then got forwarded to creator Alexei, who was surprised to read the request as he had already sort of abandoned the idea of getting to profit off his software. With an offer in writing in front of him, he had to be extremely cautious as he didn't particularly have authority to speak on the matter. We could do nothing for personal gain, he said. The one thing, though, is that he still super wanted to do it. After a couple weeks of translations and authorizations went by, Pajitnov officially replied with this very long-winded response, "Yes, we are interested. We would like to have this deal." That's it.
Okay.
That was 14 pages of Russian.
He wanted to meet up and talk about it more. However, he was still very much afraid of possible punishment from the big boys upstairs. Basically, he was dragging his feet a bit to not get in any direct trouble. Except to Stein, this was a done verbal agreement. He was already convinced that Andromeda could begin looking for future buyers for the game. One of those publishers, being his go-to at the time, a UK company named Microsoft, who were the software division of the once massive, and I say once, Maxwell Communications Corporation. It was founded by former member of Parliament Robert Maxwell in 1964. They were essentially a media conglomerate, owning several newspapers, magazines, and things like that. This, of course, made Microsoft a pretty heavy name in publishing, with the cash to back it up. So naturally, this led Stein to set up a meeting with the MCC's co-founder, Jim Machinage, who, when showed the game, Jim stared at the screen and went, "Nah," and passed it off to their technical department. Something tells me this old guy
promptly got addicted to it, right? Did I guess it right?
Something tells me this old guy didn't really know the video games or their potential. Yeah. That was until he wandered down to the tech team on a lunch break and saw everybody in the whole fucking staff like huddled around playing the game. Yeah.
See, I'm learning.
Yeah, so he thought, fine, I'll try it for myself this time. And so similarly as everybody else in our topic today, he was hella into it. He took it home, and soon their entire family had Tetris fever. So this thing was just like an STD. Whoever had their hands on it.
Whoa, like an STD. Ooh.
Yeah.
Remember the days when you could like play a video game and get addicted to it without going through 3 hours of tutorials and having to navigate through a battle pass?
Right? Like a good STD. That's what
those were the days. I don't think those exist. I don't think there are any good ones.
It's actually funny that you mentioned that, because one of the things that people talk about a lot is that this was very weird at the time to have a game that didn't have a tutorial or explanation. A lot of video games of this era frequently would be packaged with booklets to like very adamantly explain what the purpose of the game was, and Tetris just kind of threw you into it.
But some might say it's the perfect video game.
Yeah, I would say. Other than Microsoft, though, there was another company called Spectrum Holobyte.
That one I know.
Yeah? They were Maxwell's U.S. publisher. Finally, the story is in our wheelhouse, right?
Finally, America, where nobody's inventions get stolen for profit.
So Spectrum would often collaborate with Mir, often sharing titles back and forth for release in their respective regions. Their president, Phil Adam,
what a cool name.
A nice, easy name to say.
Two first names, idiot.
Sounds like a fucking Guardians of the Galaxy villain.
But he was on a trip over to the UK office, diddy bopping around for any new and upcoming software.
He was doing the diddy bop?
When Jim then showed him Tetris, he too was like, fuck yeah. Didn't take long for him to come around as much as the other guy.
Hey, Jim. Hey, other white guy, Adam.
Adam.
What are you doing? Oh, the Reds got a new game. And since they need permission from their government to prove that it has some sort of worth so that it can be a meaningful part of their society so they can get food and clothing and shelter ideally in return for their services, let's just take it and make all sorts of money off of it.
Hey, we'll get there.
I'm just predicting what white people that are men and rich always do.
If history's taught you anything. Shortly after all this and having fresh Tetris addicts, Stein made his my fingers are up deal with Maxwell and their two sub-publishers.
Hold on. Is this what it originally looked like?
Yeah. That's it.
Like a Pip-Boy. That's what I thought.
Yeah. That's pretty dope.
Yeah, that green and black.
I'm going to use that in the thumbnail.
Yeah, it's cool. I'm kind of surprised they never included that as a bonus version of that game in later Tetris games. Though the original version was made available on a website.
It looks like that if you don't use your fancy TV.
Yeah. They did get some of the letters backwards on the UI, but I'm sure they could fix that. That was a Russia joke for anyone listening.
So Microsoft would get the UK home computer and console rights. Remember, the NES is breaking sales records across the world, left and right at this time, while Spectrum Holobyte would be the rights holder for the PC and console markets in the US of A and Japan.
Who made this? Oh, the other Asians with the weird alphabet.
Mirror's deal was for a measly £3,000 plus royalties, and Spectrum's was just 11,000 freedom bucks, also with royalties. The payout was obviously not very big to Stein, but fuck it. He had other shit to sell. He was apparently much more focused on the arcade and handheld rights.
Yeah, so he was a bad businessman is what you're saying.
Well, home consoles only just came back with the NES and Famicom, and after the last crash only a few years prior, he was kind of telling that the home system thing could have just been another fad again.
Right.
Yeah. Now arcades, that's not a fad.
Well, that's the thing.
These things will last forever.
Arcades, meanwhile, in our mid-'80s, were doing pretty well, and
it's the
still
golden age of arcades.
Yeah, and handhelds, that was the future. The Game Boy had not launched yet, but was just over the horizon. The only problem with all of this, though, is that he still didn't technically have the authority to even do any of this. Money was already changing hands, except the only document he had to go by was a vague telex message from the creator and the Institute being interested, but there weren't any signatures. He didn't have the rights.
Yeah.
Publishing contracts were pending, and the Soviet Union didn't even know about it. Alexey didn't even know about it.
Alexey technically didn't have the rights, right?
He didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't think he knew that.
Right.
But if it was his job as a licenser, he should be kind of familiar. Like, it seems premeditated.
I'm pretty sure your job as a licenser is just stealing shit.
I mean, that's essentially what he just did.
Yeah.
I also suspected that he knew this, obviously, as I said, as only then did he finally write his telex response back, offering them $10,000 up front and 75% of the profits. He was even going to throw in some Commodore computers for them as well. Really, it was a great deal. Like, he wasn't a total shithead about it. Which probably explains why he rushed to set up the licensing contracts to begin with and was so confident in the message. He wasn't expecting any backlash, especially from a team of workers who weren't exactly living in luxury. Alexey replied back positively, hoping to figure out an agreement. A real one this time, unbeknownst to him. Except, as you all probably predicted, this was when the Soviet regime stepped in and ended all of the negotiations.
Of course.
Academy Soft, an internal publishing and licensing group within the Russians' Academy of Sciences, will be taking all matters related to Tetris from here. They first told Stein that any rights would only be for the IBM PC version of the game, and he, had no choice but to agree, hoping to soon get the rest of those sweet system deals locked after. By 1987, an actual contract still had yet to be signed. Microsoft and Spectrum Holobyte, however, were in their offices preparing their ports under the assumption that things were long secure.
Preparing ports for Commodore and Apple IIs and stuff and Nintendo.
And exactly. Stein, in the meantime, was mad fucking annoyed. He didn't really know who was in charge at their Academy Soft. He still thought he had a good word from the inventor man himself. It was just this weird miscommunication. Maybe. It's hard to tell. I kind of flip back and forth between giving him the benefit of the doubt and also being like, he planned this out. Those signatures, though, he was really going to need those to make everything legal, and the rights to the home console, arcade, and handheld versions were still on the table. It was time to bite back a little, he kind of thought. In April of 87, he, out of nowhere, sent a follow-up fax to Moscow, boldly claiming that his two publishers were all set to make those ports and that they couldn't wait for the release. He even went so far as to say that the deals were finalized. All this with no signature.
Mm-hmm.
But that is where we're going to be leaving it off for today.
Okay.
And I apologize for ending it there on a little bit of a cliffhanger.
Whoa, yeah, I know. Cliffhanger.
But that just means you'll have to tune in next time to see just how pissed off the Soviets are about to get. We've honestly only barely scratched the surface of the ensuing battles that would go on to rage in the Tetris War. But again, this is just more of a reason to keep people coming back on this,
You son of a bitch. You got me. You got me.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Give me up! But yeah, thank you guys it feels good to finally get into this. I've had Tetris on my mind for so long, all these months.
I mean, you've had Tetris on your mind for over 20
You're right,
years.
like since I was born. But but just to get this out is super nice. So I'm so fucking excited to get, because we haven't even gotten into the dirty stuff of the story.
No, there was zero murder in that.
I'm very disappointed about that.
Yeah.
We went this far as to not even mention a gulag.
Oh, yeah. Forgot about those.
Yeah.
That was in a James Bond movie, right?
I don't know, actually, but you know what I do know is a James Bond movie where there's an elaborate scene in one of the Sean Connerys where they're gonna facially reconstruct him to go undercover. I think in the Yakuza
they give him
or something.
they give him
and they just keep it's like this
face.
long,
It's bad.
very very long scene where it's like facial reconstruction surgery montage, and then when it's done, he's just like slightly yellower, and his eyebrows.
That was a Roger
angled,
Moore one.
and that's
yeah.
it.
So that was what? Did you ever see Team America: World Police?
Yes.
Because that where they were making fun of when
exactly.
they
just glue the hair to his face. Yeah,
That's cool. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
For our first episode of 2020. That seems weird to say. I just dropped my bottle.
And we'll find a way to kind of pace this release out in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
Not to barrage you guys with too much Tetris, but not to leave you hanging on
Yeah.
the suspense either for too long.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
There's our first episode of 2020.
Yeah.
We have obviously more Tetris coming. But
Yeah, if you think this episode's a little short, it's only because there's going to be much more of this going forward.
Yes.
So.
In addition to that, we have some other plans for the podcast. Look to our feeds and stuff like that in the future for those plans.
Yeah.
We're going to change it up a little bit to make it maybe a little more interesting for you and maybe a little bit easier for us.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like the idea of breaking up these larger stories and kind of filling other fun things in between. And
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, as soon as we get all the stuff finalized and done, we'll announce what we're doing in the meantime.
yeah. But bear with us, it'll be worth it.
Yes, so you can find more information on our social feeds, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Hot Button Cast. You can find our other episodes from 2019 and beyond on our website, hotbuttoncast.com.
Man, that's crazy to think about that there's stuff on there that says 2018. And
I know.
Like,
In addition to that, you can find links to all the feeds where you want to follow us. We're on every podcast app, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, whatever the hell else is out there. I don't know. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, and look to our feeds that I just mentioned for more information on the podcast going forward. And there is also a YouTube link on our website that might
we'll be doing a lot more with that.
become more important in the near future. So keep an eye out. Yeah.
Spoilers, Austin!
Thank you.
Tetris player, Jason, play us out with some...
Oh, yeah, and thanks to our sound guy, Jason.
Yes.
I always forget to do
I
that.
always forget that our outro song is a Tetris song remix.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say...
finally appropriate.
Here's the funny thing is, like, he could technically play us out with real Tetris music because it's royalty-free, I think, technically.
Is
because
it?
Yeah, because it's a Russian folk song, more or less. That was sort of rearranged to become the Tetris
wild.
thing. Yeah.
I mean, we already played us out with Chinese propaganda before, so why not? All right, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
See you later.